I started with my first camera maybe when I was 7 or 8.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, that was a really long
The
time
kids
ago.
these days, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds these days have iPads. You started
iPhones.
off with a camera.
Yes, that's correct.
I feel like you shifted exclusively to fashion.
I'm a person who loves shooting textures and I love shooting people. I love shooting expressions. So one thing which combined all of this was fashion. For me, getting the definition out of skin was very impressive for me.
But what happened first? Did you start your journey into audio, or was it photos which took your eye first?
To be very honest, it was photography. I've always been up for visuals. For me, anything is, even music for me is a visual art, because when you listen to a song, you imagine a certain scenario.
So if you had to take a trip tomorrow somewhere, what is the one lens you would carry?
I think it would be the 14-24.
You
Hands down.
enjoy shooting that wide?
One thing I love about that lens is its sharpness at any f-stop at any focal length. So I've shot it at 14, I've shot it at 24. So I don't have a limitation to what that lens can do.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Through the Lens. I'm Praneeth, and today I have with me an exceptional audio engineer and a supremely talented photographer, and someone I get to call a very, very dear friend of mine. I have Navneeth Balachanderan with me. Navneeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Praneeth.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.
you.
So, one of the reasons I'm here today, and one of the main reasons why I have Navneeth here today, is because he's the one who actually hooked me up with the very first Sigma lens that I used. And now his collection has only grown. And he has, I think you exclusively have Sigma lenses with you right
Correct,
now.
yeah.
So he's got around 10 different Sigma lenses. I have an entire list of what he has, but we'll come to that very soon. Navneeth, I would love to go back to, of course, I know you for a very long time, but let the viewers also know you. I want to know how you got started. How did photography happen?
So my dad was into recreational photography. He used to love taking pictures. So he used to have a bunch of cameras. So the first camera I ever used was a Minolta point and shoot. Then even it was a film camera, obviously. So then I jumped on to using a Yashica Electro 35. Used that for a while. Then that got me a Nikon EM1, if I'm not wrong. That's the model. It was a completely analog. The only digital thing about the camera, it is not even digital actually. The only thing which you can see on that camera was a meter which is powered by a tiny battery.
Do you still get those batteries?
I don't think so. I think the battery was banned due to some reason. So the camera is pretty much completely analog except for that tiny bit of metering. So everything was manual. So you had to calculate everything. So your aperture was manual. It's pretty much like a cine lens at this point. Yeah. So that's where I started off.
How old were you back then?
I think I started with my first camera maybe when I was 7 or 8.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, that was a really long time
The kids
ago.
these days, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds these days have iPads. You started
iPhones.
off with a camera.
Yes, that's correct. So I used to shoot with a Kodak 400 ISO film. That was the only film on which we used to work on that camera, because it was not a great camera for low light performance, the Minolta. So then
What lens was on it? Was it a fixed lens?
it was a point and shoot, so it was a
Okay,
fixed lens. Yeah.
okay.
So with the Nikon, when it had a 50mm, 1.8, it was a great lens. I used to use that a lot. That was the only lens I had with that one. Then eventually I moved on to Canon. That's when my Canon life started, which was again a film camera, which was an EOS Rebel G. It had a lot more features, digitally controlled film camera.
And EOS, it had autofocus.
It had autofocus. So yeah, even then I used to use a couple of analog lenses. So it was a bit fun using the film cameras because you were limited to 36 shots and you don't know what's coming out till you get it processed. So the whole process of shooting something, taking pictures of, we used to go back in the day, go take pictures of nature, plants, blah, blah, all that. So when we did all that, the process of seeing how that turns out is a day or 2 days job, because you have to go give it to the processing lab. They have to print it out. So the entire process was very exciting to see what actually turns out. So that's where I think I began. Yeah.
Oh, that's a lovely beginning. And it's a little surprising because you started off from there, and then somewhere along the lines, I feel like you shifted exclusively to fashion, because your current work at least except for your travel work, most of it is predominantly fashion. Is that
That's
right?
correct. Yeah. So I'm a person who loves shooting textures and I love shooting people. I love shooting expressions. So for me, one thing which combined all of this was fashion. And I even love shooting makeup shots. So for me, getting the definition out of skin was very impressive for me. So that's where I think I transitioned from nature to more fashion work.
You're still shooting people. I think it's some form of nature.
Yeah, that's true. So that's where I think that transition happened. Yeah.
So now that we've delved a little bit further into how you started off photography, I think there's a good number of our audience or listeners today who are actually a little puzzled that why is this man speaking about photography? So there's a whole other side to you. I'm just going to give the audience a small brief. So I also mentioned that he's an exceptional sound engineer. He's not just any sound engineer, but Navneeth you were also at one point India's youngest sound engineer who worked on a feature film.
Could be, I think, possibly.
2012, 2013 it was.
It was,
I don't remember the
earlier than that, yes.
So yeah, and after that, he's worked on hundreds of films. He's worked on thousands of songs. And right now, he is the lead audio engineer at Firdaus Studio by A. Rahman, located in Dubai.
That's correct, yes.
And he's also worked with amazing artists such as Coldplay, Beyonce, and a bunch of really other big names. So can you tell us how audio happened? What happened first? Did you start your journey into audio, or was it photos which took your eye first?
So to be very honest, it was photography.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been up for visuals. For me, anything is, even music for me is a visual art, because when you listen to a song, you imagine a certain scenario. So everything, even in music, is a visual entity. So I think when my photography side of things helped me drive me towards that, so I try to do both. So for me, it's an art form which I enjoy equally.
And how are you balancing both? How do you find the time?
It is not easy, but I try my best to do my music work during the first half of the week, and the rest of the week is photography. So I try to balance.
Are you still shooting predominantly fashion, or are you shooting anything else as well?
Mainly fashion. I used to shoot food. Now I mainly do fashion, and when I travel, I do a lot of travel pictures.
So small correction that we used to shoot food.
Yeah,
Navneeth and I used to shoot a bunch of photos together. I think for the longest time we were shooting together.
That's good.
But then we developed our own styles, and now
we are in different cities.
Apart. Oh yeah, we are also different cities. That also has something, a small amount
contribution to the difference. Yes.
Cool. Now I also want to talk about your travel photography. Not too many people have seen that. In fact, I don't even know if you even put it out anywhere on social media or any other website or anything.
So for me, I don't post it as much, but for me, travel photography is something I really enjoy, because I love like I told you, I love texture. So I love the concept of shooting nature and capturing what nature has to give in excruciating detail. That's my whole idea. So if you get the chance to see any of my pictures, I pretty much shoot them stitched. So it's like 200 megapixel plus. So I shoot basically on a 60 megapixel body. So all the images are stitched. So for me, getting that detail out on nature, so I can enjoy even the smallest bit of any landscape. That's my whole idea.
Wonderful. So if you had to take a trip tomorrow somewhere, what is the one lens you would carry?
I think it would be the 14-24.
Do you enjoy shooting that wide?
Yes. One thing I love about that lens is its sharpness at any f-stop at any focal length. So I've shot it at 14, I've shot it at 24. So I don't have a limitation to what that lens can do. Since I shoot with a 60 megapixel body, I can always crop things. I can always shoot at a crop mode and get more focal length out of it. So I think it can pretty much cover the entire spectrum what I needed to.
And what happened to this lens on your most recent trip?
It's a funny story. So I was in Georgia. I was on top of a hill. I usually, when I travel, I have my camera clipped onto my belt on a holder. So this time I was climbing a rock and I slipped, and the entire my body weight fell on the lens. I usually don't carry it with the lens cap, so that I can just grab it and shoot. So that's the whole idea. So I never had the lens cap on. So the lens hit a rock, took my entire body weight. Surprisingly, no element failed. Only the plastic was slightly loose, and I got it fixed within 2 minutes when I got back to the service center. So it was very, very impressive.
Oh, that's
build quality for that lens is phenomenal.
That's great. And what, do you carry any other lenses, or do you like to carry any other lenses on your travels?
I do, because when I'm going to a new country, I meet a lot of new people. So one lens for me, which is actually a recent thing which I really loved, is carrying the 51.2. I shoot street wide open, and I love shooting street in black and white. So the at 1.2 you still get the subject perfectly sharp, and you get so much drama out of that image at 1.2, which is very impressive.
And I might be a little biased here, but I don't know what it is about that lens. But the moment you hit black and white,
Yeah.
it's magic.
Yeah, the contrast is phenomenal. Like,
It is.
you expect, when you have a lens shooting wide open, you would expect it to be hazy or not enough contrast. But this lens, you slam it, it's like perfect.
This is the 51.2 basic.
2.2, the new one, yes, DGD.
It's a lovely piece of lens.
It's an amazing piece of glass.
I also have a list with me, which is basically a list of all the lenses you own.
Yeah.
This is literally 10 Sigma lenses. All of them are brilliant, brilliant lenses. And I would love to talk about that.
Of course.
But before we get there, I want to talk about something else. From this list, I noticed that you're mostly a prime person. You also have a couple of zooms in there, but generally, what do you prefer? Do you prefer shooting primes, or do you prefer shooting with zooms?
Okay, coming back, since I do a lot of fashion, I do a lot of studio work where I don't need to zoom in as much. So for me, my zoom requirement is not intense. So I usually stick to primes. And if I'm switching between looks, I just switch between lenses. It's just a single, it's much easier. The definition you get out of primes, I think, is unmatched, because the detail and the image definition you get is really good. So I stick to primes pretty much.
Lovely.
And I shoot, I again, coming back to aperture, I can shoot it wide open. I can shoot it like at f22. Still works in a studio.
Wonderful. And another thing, not one, not two, but you have 350 mm in there.
Okay, yes. That's true.
Is it safe to say that the 50 is my favorite focal length, but is it safe to say that you also have a slight bias to the 50?
For studio, I started off with 50, yes, but now I like the 85 more for studio work because of the tighter focal length. But 50, I think, is the most universal lens which works anywhere. I have never seen the lens not function in any scenario. You can use it in the studio. You want to do wider shots, you want to do close-ups, you want to do like extreme close-ups of your face of any definition. It just works. And you can crop, because of the resolution you get out of the Sigma lenses, it's on dot. You can crop it how much ever you like and still get the exact
especially wide open also. I've noticed that a lot of these lenses, you shoot wide open also, super sharp.
Yeah.
And even the wider lenses, focal length wide lenses, the edge-to-edge sharpness is also actually pretty on point.
Yeah,
that's one more thing I would love to ask about your 1424.
Yeah. So when I shoot, like I was telling you, I do a lot of travel shoots. When I do this, like I said, I stitch images. When I stitch images, each image which I stitch is 60 megapixel. When you put it together, it adds up to say 250 megapixel of resolution. So when you do this, usually when you shoot wide open, when you have lesser light, you have issues of the corners being extremely blurred out, or it's not defined as such. There have been scenarios in other lenses where you don't know what is actually in the corner. So when you stitch these together, it's multiple images stitched together. So it's in between shots as well, you start seeing weird aberration, weird sharpness issues. With the 1424, I've shot images at maximum stitching where I've seen I can zoom into a single piece of grass, which is maybe miles away, and still see that it's exactly on point and focus. And I've never had issues with that. I have many pictures which I've shot where you can zoom in and you know that piece of nature is like on.
And coming back to fashion, have you ever tried shooting fashion with the 1424?
Yes. Weirdly,
how did that go?
Wider, I usually stick to the 24 mil because 14 is too wide for my taste.
And there's also a little bit of distortion, maybe.
Yeah, for me, but I'm not a fan of shooting very wide because that works for me for nature, not for fashion. At least for my taste. For some people it does. But yeah, 24 I think is a great focal length, especially when you're doing street work and you're trying to capture more of the environment than just the subject.
And in the other end of the spectrum, I've noticed that you also have a couple of big guns. You have the 105 1.4, which is an extremely heavy lens, even for my hands. Generally, I like heavy gear, but
It
Even
is a
for me,
very
it's a
heavy
very
lens.
heavy
It is a
lens.
very heavy lens, but when it's on a tripod, it's on point. And especially when you're doing close-up work with eyes and a lot of definition on eyelash or makeup, it's razor sharp, and you can. There have been many scenarios. Actually, a funny thing. So I use a parabolic reflector for my main light. So 90% of the time when I shoot with the 105, you can actually see my face as a reflection on that, and my face you can identify that's me. That's the
Oh,
amount
wow.
of resolution and detail you get out of that lens.
That's just
Yeah.
spectacular. So, what is your go-to lens for beauty shots? Or you also mentioned that you do a lot of makeup shots, or
Correct.
where you like to show off the skin texture.
Correct.
What is your go-to lens for that?
So I think I would stick to the latest spectrum of the focal length, which is basically 85, 135, and 105. So I think these are my three favorite close-up portrait lenses. I've actually shot a lot of these shoots wide open. I've shot them at 1.8 f2, and I've got insane definition of the skin. Like the model is perfectly in focus. The skin detail which needs to be captured is perfect, and the background is completely blurred out. So your eye immediately goes to the right spot on the focus. So it doesn't take off from the image. So the definition you get is mind blowing.
Wonderful. So now I want you to walk us through your workflow. So right from how you select a shoot or how you select a model, how you come up with a concept, can you tell us a little bit more about that? To the point where how you pick photos, how you edit them, and then finally how the viewers see them.
Okay. So I think this is two ways of doing this. So for me, I think my main way of doing this is I come up with a bunch of ideas and I have them written down or stored in my computer. Then if I find a model who works for that shot, I'll get in touch with the model, or if there is a model who got in touch with me and I feel it will fit that model perfectly, I'll go with the shot. Then when I do this, I pick the right outfits, the right makeup artist, and the kind of makeup. Then for me, I begin with setting up lights. For me, that's my main forte. So I pick what kind of light, how much contrast I need out of each light, and what color tone. So I use a lot of gels on my lights. So I only shoot with strobes. I don't use continuous lighting. So it's nowadays everybody is switching to continuous. So I'm not that continuous person. So I'm like a strobe person. So I like freezing or actions. I prepare my lighting setup. So I usually sketch it out on a piece of paper or on an iPad to make sure I know what exact each light is doing. Then I set it up in the studio. I have my backdrop set up, my light set up. Um, I usually have, from, like you said, from a single light. So I could have up to maybe 5 or 6 lights, even in
Wow.
a small scenario.
So that's
And-
the thing about Navneeth. Another thing I would like to point out is he's somebody who's utmost comfortable just using one single strobe light, or you even throw 5, 6, 7, 8, even 9 lights into the room. He will happily make the best use of them.
So I like using a lot of lights, because the more lights I use, the more smaller each one's effect becomes, and the more definite, like more detail you get out of each light. So that's something, and you can play around with pockets of light, and you can play around with it. I think the more lights, I think drama is more.
Absolutely. And speaking about drama, I think there was a time when not all the lighting modifiers were available very easily in the city. Maybe you could get your octaboxes and your squares, but everything on maybe your strip boxes, but anything else was a little difficult. I even remember even getting a simple grid for your softbox was a little tricky. That's when you decided not to give up and you ended up making your own lighting modifiers.
Yeah, that was, I think that was back in 2017,
I
2018.
think you made a matte box, if I'm not
Like a matte box and a hard box.
And you also made an optical spot.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
You made an optical spot before people were, in the photo
correct.
community at least, were talking about it.
That's correct. Yeah. So we used to use a lighting profile.
It was from a stage light.
It was a stage light. It was actually a follow spot, but a follow spot modified the light source was removed, modified it with the actual strobe, with an Elinchrom strobe back in the day. So put that in, and I think that worked very well, surprisingly.
And it gave all the drama the pictures needed.
That's true. Yeah. And getting a lot of light output from that was very surprising. Yeah.
Wonderful.